you're at least okay. Today is a Tuesday, which means it's a history kind of chat day. Oh fuck, I forgot to put this on. No wonder my head's like, I'm blinded by the light. Oh, I feel so much better. My brain's like, chill. My dog is so weird. I'm just not even going to say what he was doing because I don't think it's appropriate for stream. Yeah, whatever you guys think of is probably going to be better than what was just happening. What I just witnessed. Oh. Hi, Sandy. Anyways. I don't know what to do today. But we're gonna talk about anarchy. At least a little bit. I got all prepped and ready to go today. Early. Probably should have taken a nap when I got home because I'm very low energy. But we'll make it work. Craig says big yawns. Hello. It's been a long time since you've been here. Hi. And you're making me yawn again. Yeah, I am tired. How are you, Crux? How is you? How is the life? Hi, Big Smoke. This cat has been following me everywhere. I have no peace. She's gonna jump on me in a minute. I don't know if you can see her. Hi, George. No yawning? Yo, that's a big ask for me. Come on. I know, just do the things so you don't potty. You chunky baby. You chunky baby. Yeah, I know. Come here. Yeah, I know you want to pick up. I know. Okay. Yum, 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 yum. She's so dumb. She's all clean, so I can pet her a bit more than I normally do. She's gonna sit on me for the rest of the stream. What have you guys been up to? How was your day? I have work drama. Ooh, am I gonna spill the tea? Probably not. Maybe I will. I'm agitated. Anarchy, what an appropriate subject given the death of Ozzy Osbourne. I was so upset. We were just talking about him earlier. Like, I think it was Saturday or something. I think, yeah. George says, I also have no update on your stuff. It shows it's in Omaha, but not delivered. That's okay. I didn't get to go to the post office. So please do not worry. It is A-okay. There's no stress there. I'm so upset that he died. Yeah, he was 76. Did you guys see his last concert? Oh my god. I think Youngblood and him had like such a good relationship, at least publicly. Ah, big small. She's just like, okay. I hate her so much. Yes, I do, but I love you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Yeah, he was 76. I'm kind of upset though. Because he was so good. His last concert made me cry though. Like, I was legitimately crying. Because he was so good. Like, legitimately good. Not just like, oh, you know, I don't know, a big performer in the space for so long, blah, blah, blah. But he was, like, actually good at it. It makes me sad. I really loved Ozzy. You know, oh my gosh, they had experiments on him too. At least he got to give his last concert at his hometown with the band. I know. Oh, it makes me upset. It makes me so upset. But I'm just glad, like, honestly, I don't know. It'll make me cry if I talk about it too much. He's just a good guy. Or he was a good guy. Man. Are you guys chill? Or are you guys sad about it too? Because I'm sad. Did you hear that Trisha Paytas or whatever had a baby too? Ah, man. Like, of course, Ozzy dies when she's like. Have you heard about the? I feel like you don't know the lore about that, George. So I'm gonna bring it up for you. But apparently, every time Trisha Paytas has a baby, someone influential dies, and she's 3 for 3 now. And the whole internet was like hoping that Trump would die instead of Ozzy or something like that. I guess no one really thought Ozzy would die, honestly. So that was kind of a oh fuck moment for most people. Your middle sister is a big Ozzy fan? Damn. Who's in Black Sabbath, right? Because Black Sabbath was I really like Black Sabbath. Type 2's here. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Oh, I get it. I've been messing with this. R.I.P. Ozzy the Legend, I know. Look at it. This is so fun. I charged it, so I'm just like, doop, doop. I have no idea how it works yet. I haven't messed with it. I'm gonna film something tonight or tomorrow. I think maybe tonight. I feel like it'd be fun. What is that? It's like the... It's like a... what even is this called? It's a tripod with a stabilizer. What the hell even is... Is everyone just confused? So my phone is charging, otherwise I'd put it in because it died. But you put your phone here and it has like a stabilizer. Oh my god, you guys. Looks like a robot arm for Johnny Five. Bruh. Bruh. No, it has like a stabilizer on it so I can put it up. And you saw one of those in an adult Japanese film? You're exposing more of yourself than I needed to know, Crooks. Just saying. I thought they couldn't have, like, I thought that's why they had, like, hentai or whatever. So then you couldn't, like, like, it's illegal or something. Is it not? I don't need to know. You can tell me. Tell me, but I'm not asking for the information. Maybe I am, but I won't admit it. Yeah, but it's like a little claw. It reminds me of, oh, what do you call it? What's the, ah, Professor, is his name like Professor Octopus or something? What are you trying to ask? I'm not asking anything. It would just be who I don't know. Actually, I'm gonna Google it. Is porn illegal in Japan? It's not entirely illegal, but there's restrictions regarding the depiction of genitals. Pornography showing sexual genitals is legal, while pornography with bird genitals is considered legal and known as AV, adult video. Yeah, I was like, isn't that why they have hentai? So they can have like, yeah, Dr. Ock. Yeah, Doc Ock. You know? We're talking about adult Japanese films, and now you're talking about the tentacle-ridden doctor. Well, okay. First, you talked about like adult Japanese films, and my brain immediately went to hentai because how could it not? And then I was looking at it in the camera. I was like, oh, it's like Doc Ock, where he's like, wah. Wait, fuck. Pretend that didn't happen. Wah. Where he like grabs things. Wah, 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 wah. Wah. Wait, fuck. Pay attention. Yeah, see? Doesn't it have like the same like mechanics? You're welcome. But anyways, this is really cool. So I'm gonna use it. I think I can like turn it on. It made it ding. Oh, just like what the fuck? This is so weird. It moves. Are you just saying There's no problem with that. I don't remember. Am I supposed to like put it in a position of my own? I still don't understand how this works. I feel like I shouldn't mess with it until I read the directions. I'm gonna turn it off. It makes a little dunk dunk. Okay, anyways, how are you guys? How was live? Pretend that I didn't just like waste 10 minutes talking about this. It's okay. I don't have anywhere to go today, which is so weird because it's a Tuesday. So that means you get more of me. Whatever will you do? Is this part of this electronic? Why is it electronic? I don't know. I just kind of put it on my. I was like, I need a tripod that has like a stabilizer or whatever. Right, hold up. I have like. I think I have like the directions or something for it on my desk. No, that's my P.O. box. Okay, my desk is like actually kind of a nightmare. Oh my god, I forgot I have to do the theater stuff. Ooh. Oh, shit. Anyways, well, I've just realized why are there significantly less pens? Because I'm working on my set. See? There is my cat Siri, and then I have the cat thing, and then I have my chalkboard. But either today or tomorrow, I'm going to be working on other stuff. I have lights, which I showed yesterday if you were here, Crux. Sorry that you weren't. I'm kidding, I'm just giving you shit. Yeah, I have plants still. They're just like all over here hiding. And then I'm also working on the upper part of my set, which you can see on my TikTok because the camera angle I have for TikTok just shows everything more. But yeah, you're really calling me out like this. I know. How terrible for you. Whatever will you do? Cry about it? I'm sorry, I'm bullying you. I'm in a sassy mood. I'm just bitter today, okay? I'm kind of taking it out on you a bit, and I apologize. Me apologize. But no, I'm working on my set, so like, I don't know. It'll look better in a week or so. I was tempted to work on my fish tank today, but I decided not to. I almost caught a lizard at work. We have lizards in our greenhouse, so I was gonna like take one home because they come with the plants and put it in there or do fish. But since I couldn't catch him, and he's really tiny, I'll just kind of leave him. But anyways, let me show you the top. Because you guys asked for this yesterday. This is what the top part looks like. See? Do you like it? I like it. I have like circles. I have like a design here. What type of lizard is it? I don't know. I think it's like a oh my gosh, it's like this is all so cursed today. Everything I've done is so cursed. It's like Tatooine. I know, isn't it? I think it's cool. I don't know what type of lizard. It's like I actually it's at my door. I'll be right back. Oh my god, today is just filled with distractions. I apologize. You're kind of right though. It is kind of like Tatooine. Yeah, canine ASMR. Yeah, he was just. He barks really loud, by the way. Yeah, are you done? This is the dog I have. If I lived in an apartment, you'd freak the fuck out. Yeah, you would. I'd get noise complaints about him. Honestly, I think you get used to it eventually, but the first week, holy fuck, it'd be bad. Yeah, you stinky butt. Yeah, he's on intruder duty. He literally lays on me all night. Yes, you do. And if there's even the slightest noise outside, I'm awake every time. Okay, excuse-moi. Excuse-moi. Are we okay now? Anyways, I'm kind of mad that Ozzy died. I'm back to Ozzy now. I'm still bitter that he died. I wish that, like, I just wish he didn't get Parkinson's, because that's like having someone who's so mobile and has their job, like, entire life and job be like that, and then your final days not being able to do that sucks. Like, he tried getting up. Oh, the last performance made me cry so much. I can't talk about it. But yeah. Did you see that almost fall over? It's fallen over a couple of times. He's kind of chunky though, so it's okay. I don't know what today is, y'all. It's so chaotic. All day has been like this, man. All day. Are you serious right now, sir? Oh my god, he's still bitter. What is there to be bitter about, Ollie? Okay, anyways, back on track of things, because otherwise we'll be distracted for freaking ever. Um, I have like two videos, at least a couple videos on Anarchy we could watch. I have two for sure that I really want to watch, but I don't know. Do you guys know a lot about Anarchy? Or like anarchists as a whole? Because I know Zach, he's raided into me and I've raided into his streams a couple of times before. Um, like he's an anarchist. But I feel like y'all don't really know what anarchy is. And I feel like I need to give an explanation as to like why I'm not really an anarchist. If that makes sense. Are you chill? Stinky butt. Gosh. You just should be me. It's okay if you guys don't know. Is my microphone back on? Yeah, it is. Okay. I was like couldn't hear for a second. But I needed a good distraction from my work today, so I was like, Anarchy? That's good. I think our first video is gonna go over the different types of anarchy or whatever, but yeah. What I believe I know about anarchy is it's very anti-government. Vibes. Vibes. That is true. That is very correct. But it's not like anti-community, which people get wrong. Usually it's very like, I don't know. We'll get into it in a minute. Anarchists usually start revolutions, you know? But other, how do I say it? Other organizations kind of take over because there usually just has to be some form of like governance. Otherwise, people freak out. You are so dirty, bro. Oh, you roll in mud today. I think you did. My has eyes on you. Oliver's like all over me right now. Sandy's at my feet. Siri's over here. And then Bixby is staring at me in the corner. All of the animals are in this room right now. I'm so overwhelmed. Can I have some space, please? May I be able to scoot over? Okay, well, I'll just get the video ready then because I don't think that's gonna happen. But yeah, I've been really wanting to talk about this for a while. And I think sometimes it can get overplayed a little bit. Like everyone's like, "Oh, anarchists are bad, anarchists are bad." And I think there's a lot of like history as to why people think that, but it's kind of like you take a couple of the worst things that have happened and then you blame it on that. And when we watch this video, you'll kind of get it. You'll be like, oh, that makes sense. I get why people are like pro versus anti anarchism. Because it's a very broad term. It's kind of like how democracy is a really broad term. Like you can have so many supposed types of democracy and still have it be considered a democracy, even if other people don't think it is. Are you chill, sir? Next time, I'll have stuff written on the blackboard, and that'll be part of the whole thing. I'll be like sitting back there crazy, just like, do you understand these dots, like how they're connected? But anyways, I have to cue it now. I'm not going to go insanely deep into it because otherwise I'll lose my mind. There's only so much like anarchy content that I can consume without my brain going like da 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 da. Drives me crazy. And oh my gosh. I guess I didn't save it. Okay. There you go. It's really short. But we've watched their content before and I thought you guys liked it. At least a little bit. It's like a very vague explainer. But it goes like straight into it every single time. You need a park and you need to mind yourself. Otherwise I'm gonna kick you out of the room. Don't be sassy. Okay. Ready, Freddies? Freddy Josie! So it's every type of anarchism explained in 12 minutes.
Anarchism argues that patriarchy and traditional gender roles are
Audio
forms
is
of
so
unfair
good, guys.
control that should be replaced by free, equal relationships. Anarcho-feminists believe that fighting against patriarchy is a key part of the broader
kind of,
struggle
George.
against the state
I
and
would
capitalism.
say-
They emphasize women's independence, love based on mutual respect, and intersectionality, which means understanding how different types of oppression like sexism, racism, and homophobia are connected. Early adherents criticized marriage as oppressive to women because it historically lacked true consent. They also opposed the nuclear family, seeing it as the source of gender inequality, and advocate for women's autonomy and economic independence. The first anarcho-feminists were pioneers in advocating for reproductive rights, sharing information about birth control despite facing legal consequences. Green anarchism is a type of environmental...
I have to mention that not every anarchist feminist believes that, like, family units shouldn't exist and stuff like that, just so you know. It's very vague. He's giving, like, a very overgeneralized and, like, historic version of stuff. And I'll correct it.
That opposes both capitalism and authoritarian control. It argues that environmental problems are closely linked to social issues, especially those caused by hierarchies and unfair power structures. Green anarchists believe that the destruction of the environment is a result of industrial capitalism's focus on endless growth and production. They advocate for reducing the scale of the economy, moving away from heavy industry, and returning to more localized, community-based living. This approach includes ideas like self-governing communities and that people living in a region should be closely connected to their local environment. Green anarchists also support preserving biodiversity and protecting animal rights. Insurrectionary anarchism.
Most anarchists actually fall within that category. And when they talk about like doing green stuff and like participating in things, they kind of want things to be more less technology focused, and kind of like how communes were in like this, I would say 80s, 70s-ish time period. So kind of go back to that time period when you guys learned about that stuff historically, and that's what they believe in. I would also say that they're really, really big on mutual aid, like a ton of mutual aid programs. So instead of having like a government be in control of stuff and regulating things, you would have specific groups of people who specialize in something regulating the industry. So, like, people who know a lot about plants and stuff would be working in the agriculture stuff, and then so on and so forth with architecture and blah, blah, blah.
A revolutionary approach within anarchism that focuses on spontaneous, direct actions like uprisings or rebellions, rather than formal organizations such as labor unions.
This is what usually
It favors
sparks the
informal,
revolution.
small affinity groups over large structured federations and values continuous class conflict and attacks against perceived class enemies without compromise or negotiations. Closely linked with the Italian anarchist movement, it has been associated with high-profile assassinations and bombing campaigns by groups like the Gallianisti and the Informal Anarchist Federation. Primitivist anarchism, or anti-civilization anarchism, is the belief that civilization itself is the source of many social and environmental problems. Anarcho-primitivists argue that the shift from simple hunter-gatherer societies to agriculture and industrialization forced people to live in certain ways against their will, often through social pressure, laws, or authority. They also claim it brought social inequality and a disconnect from nature. They advocate for a return to simpler, non-civilized ways of life, including deindustrialization,
it's like a version of what I was talking about
technology,
before,
and
like
abandoning large-scale organization. Most support living in
I'm
small,
taking you guys out of
tribal-like
this.
communities, believing
Let's
that
go.
this lifestyle would be more natural and free from the alienation caused by modern society. That's why adherents propose the abolition of civilization and a return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Vegan anarchism, or total liberation, is a political philosophy that merges anarchism with a focus on freeing animals and the earth from oppression. It opposes all forms of human and non-human domination, such as state control, capitalism, patriarchy, racism, sexism, and discrimination against elderly or disabled people. Adherents consider all forms of oppression together and see how they are connected, using direct action to challenge and dismantle them. Earth First or the Animal and Earth Liberation Front are examples of groups associated with the movement. Pacifist anarchism. This type opts for peaceful, non-violent resistance to bring about social change. It rejects violence as a form of power that contradicts anarchist values like opposing hierarchy and dominance.
This would be like Martin Luther
Pacifists
King.
support non-violent
That's kind of
revolutionary
what he
actions
was
against
along the
capitalism
lines
and the
of.
state to create a peaceful, voluntary society. They often link their
Or
views with
Panthers.
socialist critiques of capitalism, arguing that a peaceful, classless society is incompatible with capitalism's competitive nature, which can lead to conflict. The ideology is closely associated with Tolstoyan Christian and Buddhist anarchism. Influential thinkers include Henri Thoreau, Leo Tolstoy, and Mahatma Gandhi. The movement gained prominence in the Netherlands, Russia, the UK, and the US during World War II. Egoist anarchism. This is a philosophy based on the ideas of the 19th century German philosopher Max Stirner. It focuses on the individual above all else, arguing that people should act based on their self-interest and personal freedom rather than following any higher cause, moral system, or societal expectations. Stirner believed that concepts like the state, property rights, and society are just illusions in our minds, limiting personal freedom. He argued that the only limit on what an individual can do is their own power to achieve it, advocating for the complete liberation of the self from all forms of external control. Illegalism. This branch emerged in France, Italy, Belgium, and Switzerland in the early 1900s.
This one's so funny to me.
It involves embracing criminal behavior as a way of life, often focusing on theft and shoplifting. Some illegalists like Clément Duval justified their crimes as a form of resistance and a way to inspire others to challenge the system. Others, influenced by Max Stirner's egoism, believed that illegal acts needed no moral justification and were simply a means of pursuing personal desires. workers. They saw their actions as a rejection of societal norms and constraints. Naturist anarchism, emerging in the late 19th century, combines
So much
anarchism with
nature-focused
naturist
stuff.
beliefs. It promotes vegetarianism, free love, nudism, hiking, and an ecological worldview. Anarcho-naturists advocate for small eco-villages and nudism as a way to reject the artificial lifestyle of.
And these are like very vague overarching terms. Like they very much like cross over into the other kind of explanations, but these are the ones where, how do I say this? That have been almost the most prominent in today's society and culture. So,
Modern industrial society. They focus on understanding individuals in their natural, biological, and psychological aspects, aiming to free them from societal constraints. This movement was especially popular among individualist anarchists in Spain, France, Portugal, and Cuba. Queer anarchism. This perspective seeks queer liberation and the dismantling of hierarchies such as homophobia, transmisogyny, and patriarchy. It combines anarchism with queer theory, both of which reject state structures reliant on capitalism and the nuclear family. Instead, queer anarchism supports self-determination and reordering society. It often intersects with non-monogamous relationships and embraces radical individualism influenced by philosophers like Max Stirner. Anarcho-syndicalism. This approach focuses on using trade unions as a tool for class struggle. It aims to improve working conditions and ultimately abolish the state and capitalism through a social revolution, often via a general strike. Trade unions are central and are viewed as a model for a future post-capitalist society where workers control production and distribution. Anarcho-syndicalists reject political parties and parliaments, seeing them as corrupting, and instead rely on direct actions like strikes, boycotts, and sabotage to achieve their goals. They also build solidarity among workers to fight exploitation. The movement was most influential during the Spanish Revolution in 1936, where the National Confederation of Labor established an anarcho-syndicalist economy in much of Spain. Although it declined after the Spanish Civil War, it saw a revival in the late 20th century with the rise of neoliberalism and the collapse of the Eastern Bloc. Socialist anarchism. This form believes liberty and social equality are interconnected and that both must be maximized together. It focuses on the well-being of everyone, valuing each.
So, socialist anarchism and what we were just describing before are very, very closely intertwined. So, like the union stuff is very much utilized a lot. You're going to hear in both types an overlap of terminology, and it's kind of unavoidable. Like there is no escape.
Each person's happiness equally and aims to ensure equal rights to freedom and material security for all. Social anarchists call for a social revolution to dismantle capitalism and the state. They promote social cooperation through mutual aid and envision non-hierarchical forms of organization such as voluntary associations. Socialist anarchism is often contrasted with individualist anarchism, which criticizes socialism. Mutualism. This is an anarchist and anti-capitalist economic theory that supports workers controlling their workplaces and producing goods or services through cooperatives or individual artisans. It believes in a market economy but rejects profits, economic rent, or high interest rates, viewing them as exploitation of labor. Mutualists think you own something only if you actively use it. They oppose the concentration of wealth and land, aiming for an economy without large-scale capital accumulation. Mutualists also support workers managing themselves, often with the help of mutual credit systems from cooperative banks, to create a fair and decentralized society.
This is the most like modern society, by the way.
Early utopian socialists like Robert Owen and Charles Fourier, and were practically explored in Josiah Warren's community experiments in the US. Market anarchism. It's a type of anarchism that supports a free market economy where all transactions are voluntary and the state has no role. It is a form of individualist anarchism and libertarian socialism, drawing from the economic ideas of mutualism that we just explained and individualist anarchism. Post-colonial anarchism is an approach focused on fighting imperialism and supporting colonized peoples. It argues that imperialism involves cultural warfare by conquerors to erase the identity of the conquered, making them easier to control. Post-colonial anarchism aims to abolish capitalism and the state while promoting and protecting the cultures, dignity, and identities of colonized peoples. But post-colonial anarchism does not aim to create a new political unit. Instead, it opposes nationalism and advocates for self-determination through an anarchist system based on local control, free federation, and mutual aid. Synthesis anarchism. This is an organizational approach that aims to unite various anarchist groups into a single federation while respecting their differences. Developed by Russian anarchist Volin and French anarchist Sébastien Faure, it seeks to bring together communists, syndicalists, and individualists. This approach values diversity within the federation and supports a loosely organized structure to maintain the individual autonomy of its members.
And the synthesis anarchism is the one that has the most, how do I put it? It has the most structure from the ones that he was describing.
Cyber-anarchism. This is a political ideology that emphasizes privacy, political freedom, and economic freedom through the use of cryptographic software. Adherents focus on ensuring confidentiality and security in online communications by using encryption to maintain anonymity and protect against government mass surveillance. The core principles include encrypted exchanges for total anonymity, freedom of speech, and unrestricted trade. Anarcho-transhumanism. This type focuses on both social and physical freedom. It defines freedom as the ability to enhance one's experience of the world. Anarcho-transhumanists use methods like computer hacking, 3D printing, and biohacking to advance their goals. The philosophy is influenced by individualist or egoist anarchism and addresses issues like bodily autonomy, disability, gender, queer theory, and sexuality while criticizing prejudice or patriarchal structures. Adherents challenge anarcho-primitivism because they believe modern technology can enhance human abilities and improve society, while anarcho-primitivists reject technology. They also criticize non-anarchist forms of transhumanism such as democratic or libertarian types for preserving state structures. Anarcho-transhumanism also opposes capitalism, believing that it leads to a bad future when combined with transhumanism. Instead, it supports equal access to advanced technologies for personal freedom and exploring space. Subscribe for more videos, hit that like button to support us, and check out our channel.
He always goes so fast, like every time. But I feel like it was a really good video to just kind of give a vague description of all of the different types that are the most popular today. There's obviously a lot more types nowadays than just this. So it can be kind of like reductive to be like, oh, you know, there's only like blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's been a lot more popular as of late. I do have to say that if not every single form of, how do I say this? Every single form of anarchism is usually a motive for a new form of governance. Most of the time they don't really last super long outside of like smaller communities, and that's for like a lot of reasons. One could say it's because like, oh, I don't know, you could say that people are just not organized enough, which I would say isn't accurate at all. Like, people are plenty organized. It's just hard to navigate. Others could say that it could be about, like, it's difficult to maintain and it's really easy to exploit anarchism, which is why I don't necessarily believe that it's maintainable, because unless you had the whole world, or at least a very, very, like, large population of an area, so like the entirety of like North America or something like that, going to like an anarchist kind of perspective, then it'd be really, really hard to maintain it. Like, extremely, extremely hard. And that's because, I mean, I'll dive into this in just a couple minutes when we start watching this other video, but when it comes to finances, I think we're so reliant upon it that it'd be really, really hard to stray that far away from capitalism. Not necessarily because of money itself, but because of the technology that relies so heavily on finances. So these amenities that we utilize every single day, like our phones or our computers or our stoves and all this hardware that we're constantly like evolving through, we wouldn't have access to in the way that we do without capitalism. it would be really, really hard to obtain these goods at the prices that we do right now, or as easily as we do right now, because it inherently relies on slave labor. Like, we wouldn't have the different components for our computers or our phones without slave labor. And that is only possible through capitalism. So if we were to pay a fair price for our devices and stuff, it would be a lot less available. Like, it'd be very, very hard to get. George says they might work on smaller community structures, but I can't see it working on bigger countries. Yeah. And that's because we have an evolved class like slavery, and people don't like accepting that. Like, people are like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you want things to be fair and if you want things to be equal, then that means that you're going to lose a lot of the things that you have easy access to. Like, it's not just us that gets, like, an easy kind of like, oh, blah, blah, blah kind of lifestyle. Everybody would have to do it. And that's a big reason why, how do I say this? It's a major reason why most anarchists kind of go back to more of a green perspective, where they're like, oh, you should be starting off like, you should do a lot of public initiatives where you have public gardens and you have green spaces and you kind of like go back to your roots or whatever. It's because we're scaling past ethical forms of consumption. Like, we've already gone so past that. We do unethical shit every single day. Like, ChatGPT, so unethical because of how much resources it uses and all that stuff. But it's become a necessity for a lot of people, especially like people that are younger, because that's how they research. Like, when I was a kid, I remember having to like go to a library. I know I'm old, right? But I'd have to like go to a library. I'd have to cite all of my sources. I would have to go like and accumulate everything from like a thesaurus or a dictionary or something like that. Yeah, the Dewey Decimal System type 2. Yeah, hey. But you would have to do it that way. And then nowadays kids for the most part don't even understand how that works. They don't know how to search for things in different forms of books. They don't respect the time that it takes to do that. And it's just, that's like a major factor. Like, you get so used to the commodities that you have that envisioning a life without it would be hard. It's how people become like, not enslaved to capitalism, but they become so against straying away from it because they would lose all of their comforts. Yeah, type 2 says, yep, finding primary sources without the internet. It's hard. It's hard. So, like, in one hand, modern day society relies on capitalism, and without it, it would not function, which is why I'm not necessarily like an anarchist, because, like, yes, ideally, it'd be a good direction to go through, like, that phases of life and stuff like that, to, like, rely on things in the way that we used to, but we can't do it anymore without regression. And that regression would be really difficult. We still have to push through what we're going through currently in order to reach that next level. We need to find other alternative resources to power our electronics, to power like everything we're doing right now, in order for us to transition into more of an anarchist friendly or like anarchist communist society minimum. Like, we're in that weird buffer period that it'd be hard to go back and still like, because unless you had the whole world doing that, and that's like a whole nother thing. Like, there's a lot of like, I'm not even gonna dive into that. That's just fucking nanner shit. George says, yeah, I don't see young folks giving up their phones and starting a garden. Not going to happen. I know, exactly. People like have a garden and have their phones, but even me personally, like, everything I do is online. Like, I have a whole social media like platform that I've been building up for the past couple of years. And I've been doing stuff online since I was like a young teenager. And I've just started taking it like not more seriously, but like, I don't know. I've just started doing like I'm really committed to it and I'm heavily invested into it. And I don't even know what I would do without the outlets that I have through like online spaces. Like, it's just become like my, like, even if I don't become super successful with it, which most people never get there, And maybe I'll never get there too. But like, it's just become like my life, you know? I can't even picture my life without it anymore. But if you were to talk to me like 8 years ago when I was living in my van, it was the complete opposite. I was more of an anarchist, like, honestly, kind of not a tanky, but more tanky affiliated because I was like, we shouldn't have these things. And now I'm like a slave to it. I'm like, oh, can't get me away from that now. Anyways, it's really fascinating. And I know, like, we could all go back to it. It's just extremely difficult. Like, extremely, extremely difficult. Now, I have, like, a video that I'll link in a little bit for us to watch. But there's, like, an anarchist online. His name is Sean Grenier. I haven't watched a ton of his content. Actually, I've watched quite a bit of it. But there are certain things that like I agree with him and I disagree with him on. So he's gonna like deep dive into some books and excerpts, which I highly recommend that you read on your own time. They're kind of lengthy, and honestly, I've just only listened to the audiobook, so that's like as far as I'm gonna get with that stuff. Uh, but I'll kind of pause every once in a while to critique it. But I think I don't know. He's given the most thorough and kind of like not middle grounds explanation because he's very biased. But I think it's the easiest to comprehend compared to like other anarchists that you'll find online. I don't know. I've been like debating talking about this for a while. Oh, fight me. But yeah, I think it's pretty good though. I mean, do you guys have any questions before I start? This is a little bit different than what I normally discuss. I usually try not to dive really deep into this, but it's been coming up more in my life, and I've been having to talk about it more, so this is like good practice for me. At least like a little bit. Sorry, my cat's like distracting. Okay. I mean, are you good? I feel so awkward doing this. It's so weird. I don't know why I'm doing this. I felt like I should. So we're doing it.
In our knowledge of the world. That's part of the human condition. Very often, these gaps are filled with preconceived ideas we haven't yet critically examined. Also, information and especially opinion comes with biases. In this video, I want to disclaim one of my biases, a philosophy through which I see the world which I believe reflects in all my videos. I am an anarchist. This video isn't only made as a disclaimer of my biases, but also as a way to correct
Looks like an
preconceived
old school
ideas of what it
hipster.
is. If you're generous enough to give me some of your time, even if you disagree with the ideas of anarchism, at the very least, you'll be able to say you understand it. As an introduction to anarchism, we'll be taking a look at Enrico Malatesta's 1892 pamphlet, Anarchy. It's a very short text, but we'll summarize it chapter by chapter. That way, if you decide to read along, you can follow these summaries and get the most out of it. The link to the free online version of the text is in the description. This video obviously doesn't replace Malatesta's book, and I do strongly recommend you to read a chapter and then watch the section of the video about this chapter. But if you don't like reading, well, hopefully I can make you read one
Or we
short
don't have the
chapter at a
time to,
time, and
y'all.
through this video,
Okay.
we might get more out of it together. If after reading chapter 1 you decide that reading just isn't for you, that's fine. You'll still learn a whole lot about anarchist theory from this video.
I think you did a pretty good job, by the way.
As always, we'll be live streaming right after this video, and this stream is pretty special because we have a guest. It's Daniel from Anarch, and we'll be asking him about anarchy, anarchism, and maybe how he became an anarchist, or maybe some of your questions will be asked as well. So come hang out, come talk anarchy, come meet Daniel, and we'll have a lot of fun. So, when you're trying to define a word, a good place to start can be etymology.
Here we go.
That's how Malatesta opens the first chapter of his book by stating that the Greek roots of the word anarchy mean without government. But this is not how we usually understand it. The common usage of this word is highly pejorative and is synonymous with chaos and disorder. But why? Malatesta thinks that it comes from a prejudiced view that government is necessary for any society to function, that a lack of government is some kind of pathological problem and would necessarily lead to a dysfunctional and chaotic society. This unjustified belief comes from habit. Humans adapt to their conditions and pass on habits, but this does not justify these conditions nor these habits. For example, descendants of a long line of slaves could believe that slavery is an essential condition of life because it's always been that way. This was also noted by Etienne de la Boétie in Discourse on Voluntary Servitude, written in 1576. We should exonerate and forgive them, since they have not seen even the shadow of liberty, and, being quite unaware of it, cannot perceive the evil endured through their own slavery. Similarly, workers depend on work to feed themselves and believe that it's because of business owners that they don't die of starvation. They believe that these masters feed them, then ask themselves, how would we eat if there were no masters to feed us? Another example Malatesta gives is the image of someone whose legs were bound from birth, but still managed to walk. That person could think that the very reason they can walk is because of these bonds, which in reality are limiting them. Now imagine a whole system of ideas constructed around the necessity for this person to wear
I'm gonna
bonds
try to
to
not
their
interrupt a
legs.
lot.
Doctors would come up with explanations and theories as to why, by
If you have
removing these
questions,
bonds,
please ask.
this person could not walk. That person would protect these bonds with their life and consider anyone who are trying to free them an enemy. These constructed ideas, the ones that try to explain how the state is necessary, are very present in our society, and Malatesta, throughout this short book, will deconstruct these ideas. He says that, like the worker or the slave, we believe that without an authority, we could not live properly. He also says that, like for the bound person, we live in cultures in which the idea that government is necessary is hammered into our heads by the masters, the priests, the teachers, etc. This is why the word anarchy has been synonymous with chaos and destruction. We believe ourselves to be dependent on authority to survive. But anarchy isn't the first word to be misused for political reasons. Just a couple of centuries ago, when people believed in the necessity of a one-man government, a monarchy, the word republic was used as a synonym for chaos and disorder. So if we can convince people that not only is the government not needed, but that we could do much better without one, the word anarchy could be understood as we anarchists understand it: natural order, unity of human needs and the interests of all, complete freedom within complete solidarity. Now, before going any further into the book,
This is where like semantics are really important, and but we've taken a couple of deep dives into semantics and why they're so important and why you need to understand like what your definition of a word is and what another person that you're consuming content from, or even just talking to, what their definition for a word is, because it usually is not lining up, because there's lots of different layers to that, but this is what anarchy is for most anarchists. Here we go.
Malatesta feels like it's necessary to define the state. It's the sum total of the political, legislative, judiciary, military, and financial institutions through which the management of their own affairs, the control over their personal behavior, the responsibility for their personal safety, are taken away from the people and entrusted to others who, by usurpation or delegation, are vested with the powers to make the laws for everything and everybody. The idea of delegation here is pretty important as it implies representational democracy, which Malatesta goes back to in the following chapters. He follows this by saying that because we often mix up the idea of state with the idea of society, he will use the term government instead of the state. He also defines what he means by the abolition of the state: the destruction of all political order based on authority, and the creation of a society of free and equal members, based on harmony of interests and the voluntary participation of everybody in carrying out social responsibilities. So when anarchists say they want to abolish the state, they don't mean that they want to abolish social cohesion, collectivities, and social bonds. They believe that these things will actually be strengthened once authority no longer exists.
It forces you to rely on one another rather than just a governance,
But
which we'll
what
dive
is
into.
the government? Commonly, we believe the government to be an abstract social power, an invisible entity independent of whoever is holding office. It's the abstract representation of the will of the people, and is usually associated with great qualities such as justice and equity. And this view is greatly encouraged by the people in power, believing that the idea of authority should always be defended, even if the authority can sometimes be bad and do the opposite of promoting justice and equity. Commonly, we believe that the government is a good thing for society. Now, let's see what anarchists think. Anarchists don't really see the government as an abstract representation of the will of the people. They see it as governors, kings, presidents, ministers, what have you. A government is someone or a collection of people with the power to regulate the workings of society through laws. Such laws, Malatesta says, are there to regulate interhuman relations and to see that they are carried out, to levy taxes and collect them, to impose military conscription, to judge and punish those who contravene the laws, to subject private contracts to rules, scrutiny, and sanctions, to monopolize some branches of production and some public services, or, if they so wish, all production and all public services, to promote or to hinder the exchange of goods, to wage war or make peace with the governors of other countries, to grant or withdraw privileges, and so on. So the governors are the ones who can make use of the social power, being the community's collective physical, intellectual, and economic power. This concentration of power in the hands of a few governors constitutes the principle of government, of authority. But now that we answered what the government is, we have to answer if the government is desirable. Malatesta asks the question as follows: why give them this power to take over willy-nilly the collective strength to use as they wish? Are they so exceptionally gifted as to be able to demonstrate with some show of reason their ability to replace the mass of the people and to safeguard the interests, all the interests, of everybody better than the interested parties themselves? Are they infallible and incorruptible to the point that one could, with some semblance of prudence, entrust the fate of each and all to their knowledge and to their goodness? So here are some amazing questions. They imply that nobody is so exceptionally gifted to replace the mass of the people, act in their interest, and not be corrupted by power. Malatesta says that the responsibility of such authority is too big to be undertaken by a few people. Anarchists believe that no human can bear such responsibility, such power, without being corrupted, and in consequence, we shouldn't trust anybody with that kind of power. We can't trust anyone, not even an anarchist, with a concentration of power. But it's not only about absolute power corrupting absolutely, it's also about abilities. What makes someone so much more suitable to make decisions rather than the community itself? I won't quote many millionaires here, but what Michelle Obama said illustrates my point. I have been at probably every powerful table that you can think of. I have worked at nonprofits, I have been at foundations. I have worked in corporations, served on corporate boards, I have been at G summits. I have sat in at the UN. They are not that smart.
It's true.
Alright, well, what if there was an infinitely good and infinitely wise group of people?
Hmm.
Would the concentration of power into
I think it's important to note that most people who are in power right now, legitimately, like, even all the people that Trump fucking appointed, they don't even know what's going on within their positions. Like, RFK Jr. doesn't even have any medical backgrounds whatsoever. Like, everything that he has jurisdiction over, he just knows, like, nothing about. Same with Pam. Like, she barely knows, like, fucking anything. And, like, the list goes on and on. Most of the people that are in high positions of power just they may have some experience in the field that they're talking about and stuff that they're like governing over, but they're really not experts. We could talk about like legislatures, members that we have at a local scale too. Like a lot of them don't really understand what's going on. And you're lucky if you have like a mayor or a senator, like a local senator for your state or something like that. Or like even a governor that even understands what's going on with the economy. Most people just don't know. You can only be specialized in like one specific thing. You can't know everything. So it's hard to not have a lot of sympathy for these arguments. And that's why I'm not like a huge like anti-anarchism kind of person, because I understand that the formatting and how we have things constructed right now doesn't make sense, and I understand why people want to go away from that. There's ways we can make it work, but it's going to take like an entire restructuring of the governance that we currently have.
Their hands still be beneficial. If a
I'm also
government could be
doodling so I can pay
justified,
attention
it's
better.
certainly a government of all wise and all good individuals. Malatesta says that the government in that case would still be pointless. These people now at the government wouldn't benefit society more than they already do. Perhaps it would slow down the development of society, as these people would have to deal with so many different subjects without fully understanding each and every one of them, from agriculture to education, all the way to health services and culture.
There you go.
Plus, a government, even if managed by very good people, would still spend resources and energy in preserving itself and fighting off dissidents. And still, no matter if they're infinitely good or not, we have to determine who will put them in power. Should they impose themselves by rights of conquest, war, or revolution? Well, certainly not. How would we be sure that they would act for the benefit of all? Should they be selected from a particular class or party? Again, absolutely not, as the interests of that said party or class will most likely be defended over the general interest. But what about voting them in? Well, here's an interesting question on suffrage. Malatesta says that numbers are not an indicator of reason, justice, nor ability. Being elected doesn't mean you're the best, and it doesn't mean you're the most honest. It just means that you're good at getting votes. You're good at convincing a public. Malatesta also expresses concern for minorities, which, in this case, are not accounted for. So, to anarchists, a government is undesirable because even if its governors are infinitely good and incorruptible, which is impossible, they wouldn't be able to manage society as effectively as communities could, for they have, like any other humans, limited knowledge. They can't make decisions on everything. And on top of that, it would be hard to find a fair and equitable way of putting them into power without alienating a large part of the population, because concentrating power into one entity necessarily leaves a lot of people powerless.
Yes, it's true. You could agree with some bits
Alright,
and still
so
not
we
be an
asked if the
anarchist, by the
government
way.
was desirable. Now let's see how it's justified. Part 1. The justification for the existence of a government. Malatesta argues that every justification for the existence of a government can be boiled down to the prejudiced view that society is consisted of individuals with conflicting interests. This would mean that a higher power and authority would be needed to make decisions to protect the different interests of all. The government would then find the best way to achieve the maximum satisfaction with the least possible sacrifice. I would call this method of justification the government as mediator. In other words, without the government, who will force anybody to respect the interests of others? It's the whole idea of the freedom of each is limited by the freedom of others, and authoritarians will say, if nobody establishes and enforces these limits, what would stop people from ignoring them? From there comes the idea that in anarchy, nobody cares about the freedom of others, or in one word, chaos. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Historically, governments have pretty much always been a tool of domination. They weren't there to enforce order and to make people respect each other's freedoms. They usually destroy freedoms. They were not mediators. Most of the time, and anarchists would argue that it hasn't changed, Governments were comprised of a minority, kings, emperors, aristocrats, using governmental power, by power I mean armed groups such as armies or the police force, to oppress and to enrich themselves off of the people's work. Malatesta establishes two ways of oppressing. One, directly with physical violence, that is to say, power or political privilege or whoever owns armies. Two, you can oppress indirectly by taking the means of life away from the people you're dominating. In other words, private property or economic privilege. I think we should take a moment to talk about this second way of oppressing masses, as it's not as obvious as physical violence. Anarchists strongly oppose private property because it's a tool of domination, but without proper explanation, it's hard to understand why. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the first man to declare himself an anarchist, wrote an entire book on the question of property in What is Property, published in 1840. In a nutshell, private property, or broadly the private ownership of land and buildings, is a
Marx
tool
talks
of
about it a
domination
little bit
because
too.
in a world with limited resources, claiming a land to be his or her own takes away the ability for others to work on it. In other words, imagine a world where humans would need a specific resource to live. If one class owned, in some way, all the means to produce this resource, then everybody outside of that class would be subjected to it. They'd become their slaves. Or imagine you live on an island with 3 other people and claim it for yourself. You say that this island is yours. Then these other people wouldn't be able to feed themselves. No matter how hard they'd want to work, they couldn't because they'd have no land to work on. What you then could do is use that land as a tool of domination and have them work your land. In return, you'll give them food, and you'll get food without having to work one bit. You'd be exploiting them. This idea that private property is one of the foundations of domination isn't new. The very well-known 18th century political philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote about it in Discourse on the Origin and Basis of...
Literally, the elementary school I went to was named after this dude, so that's how I know about him. But I think it's important to also understand that, like, this is what colonialism is about. So before, like, this is kind of taking it back to old school, like, American history, but before Spanish colonialists and European colonialists came to America, the Native Americans basically had their own form of governance, which didn't really have land ownership. It was kind of very fluid, and if the land wasn't already being occupied, then it was shared land. Like, you only owned the land that you were specifically on at that time. Most tribes followed by those regulations. And it's fairly, like, capitalistic to buy land and to own it. But when you go back throughout time, land ownership was less and less common because there was less reasons to have land ownership. There was, like, less, like, people would exchange goods instead of, like, having finances and that sort of thing as a way to drive things. So there was less things that they could own as a whole. So, like, maybe like a couple thousand years ago, so the fanciest fucking thing that you could really have as a person would be like a really fancy chariot and like 20 fucking horses and cattle and shit like that. Like, maybe some fine jewelry and whatever, but what you can have now is like boats and literally planes, and you can even send yourself into fucking space. Like, what you can have with assets is a lot more than what you could have back then, which is why there's more motive to have your own private property
inequality among
than before.
men.
And it's been like that for a long
The
time.
first man who, having enclosed a piece of ground, bethought himself of saying, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, was the real founder of civil society. From how many crimes, wars, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortunes might not anyone have saved mankind by pulling up the stakes or filling up the ditch and crying to his fellows, "Beware of listening to this impostor. You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and the earth itself to nobody." Today, most people are born without any property. They come to this world, and when they become independent, they have to work, not for themselves, but to bring profit to their bosses. In other words, to be able to sustain yourself, you can't just work for yourself. You need to work for someone, and that relationship is fundamentally exploitative. In a fair society, you wouldn't have to sell your labor and get exploited solely because you don't own land. In a fair society, land or any other means of production would be owned by everybody and could be worked by everybody without oppression. Here's one last example from Karl Marx's Capital. Mr. Peel took with him from England to Swan River, West Australia, means of subsistence and of production, so like machinery, to the amount of £50,000. Mr. Peel had the foresight to bring with him, besides, 300 persons of the working class, men, women, and children. Once arrived at his destination, Mr. Peel was left without a servant to make his bed or fetch him water from the river. Why? Because Mr. Peel's workers could work on their own land in Australia. They didn't have to work for Mr. Peel anymore. They didn't have to be oppressed. They had access to land. When all the land is appropriated by capitalists, these free people would have to go back to making Mr. Peel's bed and fetch him water from the river. This is why private property is oppressive. Anyway, we were saying that there are two ways to oppress: power and private property. Keeping that in mind, we can now move on to mankind's history of oppression. You first had, a long time ago, some small societies in which both powers, political and economic, were in one single pair of hands. Through intimidation, that person got their community to work for them. They were the landowner, the ruler, the judge, and the executioner, all at the same time. But as society expands and grows more complex, a small class of owners also grows. Slowly, they start accumulating the means of production, tools, land, etc., and establish their power as the people who control the very source of life, production. By doing so, they can manipulate political power and have it protect them. Malatesta demonstrates how this has happened when conquerors take control of societies. Conquerors will own the government and property, but because it's so hard to manage, will eventually give the property back to the owners. This results in the government or force becoming dependent and subservient to the owners, the source of force. But this relationship, Malatesta adds, has never been so apparent now than it ever was. With wealth increasing so much, the power of the owners multiplied. The discovery of the Americas and the Industrial Revolution strengthened the owners' power so much that the capitalists themselves obtained political power. This was the birth of modern democracies. Governments consisted of capitalists defending capitalist interests. Malatesta critiques our modern democracies, which he doesn't consider democratic. In many countries, workers nominally have a more or less important say in the election of the government. It is a concession made by the bourgeoisie, both to avail itself of popular support and struggle against the monarchical and aristocratic power, as well as to dissuade the people from thinking of emancipation by giving them the illusion of sovereignty. But whether the bourgeoisie foresaw it or not when they first gave the people the vote, the fact is that that right proved to be entirely derisory and served only to consolidate the power of the bourgeoisie while giving the most active section of the working class false hopes of achieving power. Even with universal suffrage, and we could well say even more so with universal suffrage, the government remained the bourgeoisie's servant and gendarme. So Malatesta doesn't think that the government is a mediator for conflicting individual interests, but more of an instrument to impose certain interests on all. While it says it protects the general interest, anarchists believe that it's protecting the interests of a small but powerful minority. And this is not only applicable now, it has always been that way. The government is oppressive and is using instruments of domination, i.e. tax collectors, the police force, education, to maintain this oppression. Malatesta does recognize the fact that the government, while being oppressive, has also had some beneficial actions, but also says that it doesn't redeem it. We'll get back to that in chapter 6. But, of course, a government would try to hide the fact that it works with the wealthy class and here's how, according to Malatesta, the government hides its true nature. The government cannot impose respect for
This
the
is
lives of
important.
privileged people if it does not appear to demand respect for all human life. It cannot impose acceptance of the privileges of the few if it does not pretend to be the guardian of the rights of all. They also need to be the guardian of the rights of all in fear of a workers' rebellion. If governments adopted a reform like, for example, a law that would regulate the length of a working day to 8 hours, it would be to stop the angry masses from rising up. In other words, to Malatesta, if the government appears to be on the workers' side, it's just preventing a workers' revolution.
And I think it's important to like draw parallels to what we're seeing in the present day moment. So some of you guys may view this to be controversial. Some of you guys may like understand this to already be fact. But when it comes to like left-leaning or socialist motives that are passed in governance, it is usually passed to prevent like horrible uprisings or to appease people and maintain things for as they are. So like think about the like workers' rights, right? So making it so that children don't have to work anymore. There were a lot of protests regarding that and a lot of uprisings trying to be like, hey, children should have education, children should have this, blah, blah, blah. And you don't even have to go that far back. We can also talk about, I'm going to slow down a minute, I'm talking really fast. But we can also consider what happened with the Black Panthers and having school lunches and school breakfasts and that sort of thing. Providing aid that is outside of the government, that the public approves of, that puts public faith into an organization outside of the existing government, is going to motivate the government to do more things than just protesting. Because if you can show the people that, hey, this can happen, hey, this is really fucking easy to do, that's going to make the government be like, oh fuck, we have no excuses, and then people are not going to trust the government anymore. So that's primarily what he's talking about. Like, it can either come from people being really upset and being like, hey, we're going to want to overthrow things if you don't change your ways, or people kind of outshining the government, which honestly happens a lot more than people would like to think.
That would lead to the destruction of capitalist privilege. If it wasn't for that, the capitalists or the government would not care at all if workers got mad. So we've seen how the government is, and always was, protecting the privileges of the wealthy class, but is there anything else that would qualify the government as a tool of domination? To Malatesta, there is. Governments make anything become a means by which to oppress, to surveil, and to police. It corrupts the sentiment of justice, as private property is strongly defended while workers' conditions are sometimes outright ignored. It also corrupts education, as it becomes a way to shape minds and create docile workers. And all of this domination would make sense if, according to authoritarians, society is just a bunch of potentially violent individuals with opposing interests. In a world where people compete to protect their interests, there are winners and losers, and the people who win over the government, well, they're winners. The winners won't use their hard-earned power to protect the rights and interests of the vanquished, and they won't limit their own power. The idea that the government is just a moderator and the defender of the public good is a lie. It's a myth to make the losers accept their domination. Malatesta adds that it's an illusion, a utopia never achieved and never to be realized. I would like to point out how interesting it is that Malatesta calls the people who believe in governments utopians. Most of the time, anarchists, or more broadly socialists, will be labeled utopians, but here, the roles are reversed.
Jeez,
For
that
those
fucking
interested,
scared
Kropotkin
me.
did the same in Anarchism is Philosophy and
That scared you
Ideal.
too?
If men were those superior beings
Are
that
you
the
awake?
utopians of authority like to speak to us of, if we could close our eyes to reality and live, like them, in a world of dreams and illusions as to the superiority of those who think themselves called to power, perhaps we also should do like them. Perhaps we also should believe in the virtues of those who govern. With virtuous masters, what dangers could slavery offer? It's more utopian to believe in a fair society with a government than a fair society without one. But yes, if man was truly wolf to man, which is how people justify the existence of a government, then the government would logically be used not as a tool to enforce justice and
I would argue that there will always be a governance, even unless society collapses to the point where people don't interact with each other at a large scale anymore. Because there's always going to be someone who acts as like a face for a community. But I think with anarchism, that would change in the sense of instead of having like a president or a prime minister being the face for an organization, if you had someone who is like in charge of agriculture for a specific region, they would speak to other people and be the face for agriculture rather than having the president be like, oh, I have no background in agriculture whatsoever, but I'm going to talk about it like I do and talk to advisors and stuff. You would have the actual professionals doing that and enforcing those regulations and directly communicating that with the public, which you do see a modified version of in most other progressive countries. So in Canada, like the people who are in charge of medicine and stuff like that actually tend to be doctors or have a lot of background in it. Or people who are in charge of like the sciences or that form of regulation, like education and stuff. It like the list goes on and on. But I think instead of having specific people like in Congress or as like a president or even having like a large scale legal system, you would have that be more circumstance based. So instead of having like an overall judicial committee that goes over everything, you would have like a judicial committee that specializes in certain things. So, like, what I believe should happen, and this is what I've talked about so many times on my channel, is that there should be dedicated sections and fragments of governance rather than having people who have this overarching power, because that is what causes the problems. So, like, you would have specific court systems designated for certain things. So, like, residential court or like spousal court or interfamily personal relationships where you have to have like psychology backgrounds or something like that. And then you would have different rules and regulations to fit those specific jurisdictions. And in that way, you would be able to maintain a large scale society without having everything collapse, maintain order, but also reduce a lot of problems when it comes to like, can you trust in the people that you have above you? And then be ensuring that like professionals in the field would be able to vote for certain things. So like if you, and I think that would make things less corruptible, but that the voting system would obviously have to change as well. That's another huge thing that I've been thinking about a lot. I've been thinking about this for decades, ever since I was like learning about governance the first time when I was like in elementary school. I've been thinking about this because I think anarchism is a good tool to get you to that point, but it's not sustainable. Anyways, it's not sustainable unless you have like what I was just describing.
equality, but as a
But I'm
way
not
for
an
some people
anarchist.
to dominate others. Part 2. Mutual aid.
Oh.
Thankfully, this justification that individuals in a society all compete against each other and wouldn't respect each other's liberty if it weren't for the government is wrong. Man's fundamental essential characteristics are the instinct of his own preservation, without which no living being could exist, and the instinct of the preservation of the species, without which no species could have developed and endured. He is naturally driven to defend his individual existence and well-being, as well as that of his offspring, against everything and everybody. With that being said, Malatesta identifies two ways of surviving. One is individual struggle, that is to say, by struggling against nature and the individuals of the same species, and by nature I mean natural forces that work against our survival, hunger, thirst, and the need for shelter. In that case, you'd be all alone in providing for your own needs and the ones of your offspring. But another way of surviving is by mutual aid, which is a subject Peter Kropotkin wrote about in his book Mutual Aid, A Factor of Evolution, published in 1902. This way of surviving is by association, by struggling against nature as a collective force. Humans could only develop through cooperation, through mutual aid. We're extremely vulnerable when we're alone, especially against predators, but collectively, we are an incredible force. We have evolved as a species to act in a cooperative way because this is what our survival and our well-being hinges upon. It's so deeply rooted in us that we have developed a moral sense from it. We feel bad when treating another human wrong because doing so harms the community. Humans with strong moral feelings, such as this one, were more likely to survive as it made their community stronger, which resulted in us, humans, being an extremely cooperative species. We evolved to be very social. Our brains and our speech organs allow us to communicate and share very complicated ideas, such as the ones I'm explaining right now. All of this makes humans what they are. We are dependent on social life, and without it, Malatesta argues, we wouldn't be humans anymore. Every struggle aimed at gaining advantages independently or at the expense of others is contrary to the social nature of modern man and tends to drive him back towards the animal state. Solidarity, that is, the harmony of interests and of feelings, the coming together of individuals for the well-being of all, and of all for the well-being of each, is the only environment in which man can express his personality and achieve his optimum development and enjoy the greatest possible well-being. This is the goal towards which human evolution advances. It is the higher principle which resolves all existing antagonisms that would otherwise be insoluble and results in the freedom of each not being limited by, but complemented by, the freedom of others. So humans in cooperation are not in constant conflict. The rule of the freedom of each is limited by the freedom of others doesn't justify governments because it just doesn't apply to humans. Humans are naturally cooperative. Our freedoms complement each other. The freer you are, the better off I am. And this is exactly what we'll be expanding on in the next chapter. At the end of chapter 3, Malatesta wrote about solidarity and how it's a fundamental characteristic in human beings. Chapter 4 expands on that with a quote by Mikhail Bakunin. "My freedom is the freedom of all." Let's see what he meant by that. Individuals aren't independent. They are strongly influenced by each other. You are a product of your environment. If your neighbor is in chains, you will greatly be affected by that. Your existence, Bakunin argues, will be determined by their slavery. I who want to be free cannot be, because all the men around me do not yet want to be free, and consequently, they become tools of oppression against me. And by that logic, even if you only care about your self-interest, you will strive towards solidarity. Your own interest and the interest of society are one. But this solidarity and this cooperation can be used perversely. Cooperation isn't always consensual. You can create something very similar to cooperation by forcing people to work for you. Take, for example, a fast food production chain where all workers cooperate, but not because it's better for them to do so, but because they're forced to. It's more productive. They do it for the boss's profit, and if they don't, they won't receive a wage and they won't be able to feed themselves. In this case, the fruits of cooperation don't go to the parties agreeing to it, but to the person forcing this cooperation. This is a fundamental contradiction in humankind. We are very cooperative, yet we divide ourselves into different individuals, different nationalities, different races, and different genders. This contradiction is most apparent in a capitalist system. We cooperate together to mass produce, but we're also in competition with one another. The principle of each for himself, which is the war of all against all, arose in the course of history to complicate, sidetrack, and paralyze the war of all against nature for the greatest well-being of mankind, which can be completely successful only by being based on the principle of all for one and one for all. Malatesta sees this tendency to divide and dominate as animalistic and contrary to our human instincts. The principle of each for him or herself, as we have seen earlier, can't guarantee an individual's well-being. The fight against nature has to be fought collectively. Mankind has suffered great harm as a result of this intrusion of domination and exploitation in the midst of human association. But in spite of the terrible oppression to which the
Glad you're here.
masses have been subjected, in spite of poverty, in spite of vice, crime, and the degradation which poverty and slavery produced in the slaves and in the masters, in spite of accumulated antagonism, of wars of extermination, in spite of artificially created conflicting interests, the social instinct has survived and developed. This is how strong our instinct for cooperation is. We could even say that because of these hardships, we are able to connect and understand each other when suffering. On top of that, Malatesta says in 1891 that travel, communication, science, literature, production have all developed so much that all of humanity is even more linked than ever before. Imagine what he would say now. Now, more than ever, the growth and development of individuals across the world contribute to our own development and well-being. And to go back to Bakunin when he said, "My freedom is the freedom of all," our well-being hinges upon all circumstances acting on all human beings because all human beings are, in some way, connected. Malatesta explains how someone living in the Apennines isn't only strongly affected by the conditions of the Italian people,
If you have
but
anything to
also
add,
on
please
workers'
do. I can
conditions
always
in
pause.
America
It's kind
or
of long.
Australia, on
We're
the
about
discovery
halfway through,
made by
though.
a Swedish scientist, on the state of mind and material conditions of the Chinese, on there being war or peace in Africa. In other words, on all the circumstances, large and small, which anywhere in the world are acting on a human being. This vast solidarity is mostly unconscious. People don't consciously calculate how helping others actually benefit them. It's spontaneous, and Malatesta says that this is evidence to show how solidarity is a human instinct. It's a natural law amongst men, and it survives even a system which combats it. Now, Malatesta goes on to show how this basic principle of "I do better if people around me do better" should lead to the abolition of private property. Of course, the liberation of every worker around the world is extremely beneficial for every worker, but it would also be beneficial for the former wealthy class because they too are connected to workers, and by giving up their exploitative attitude, they will create a better and safer environment for their own growth. Now, with the abolition of private property, people will stop working for others and put their labor not in the service of the interest of a few, but for their own interest, the interest of humankind. And if we traded domination and economic privilege for human solidarity by abolishing private property, why would we need a government? Once private property has been abolished, government, which is its defender, must disappear. If it were to survive, it would tend always to reestablish a privileged and oppressing class in one guise or another. We are used to a minority imposing and directing cooperation for their own interest, but here, cooperation would be free, voluntary, and directed to everybody's interests, and therefore it would become that much more widespread and effective. Once individuals understand that their interest resides in the interests of all, will possibly unlock inconceivable potential for the human race. Our methods of cooperation, our sociability, will develop as we grow collectively. We will finally organize in order to achieve the greatest well-being and the greatest freedom for all. People will see their neighbors as comrades with whom they fight against natural forces. They won't try to accumulate the most comfort for themselves, but for everybody, because they'll understand that if everybody is comfortable, the environment that determines us will be much more fertile and will make us grow tenfold. This society of free people, this society of friends, is anarchy. In the last few chapters, we saw how governments are necessary to maintain unjust societies. They need to exist to defend social inequalities, to defend private property. We have seen that competition between individuals goes against human nature, and that progress is done through cooperation.
The music.
And finally, we saw that we should abolish private property and its protector, the government, in order to work together for the common interest. In this chapter, Malatesta answers a couple of possible objections to these points. The listed objections are by authoritarians, and by authoritarians, Malatesta doesn't only mean the proponents of dictatorships and monarchies, but anybody who supports authority, both on the right and on the left. The first objection to the abolition of the government comes from authoritarian socialists, and it goes as follows. Once private property is abolished and there are no more class or privileges,
There you go.
the government would change its nature. It would be impossible for it to defend the interests of a particular class since there wouldn't be any more classes. The government could then truly defend the interests of all, organize our society, and protect us against people who try to reintroduce privilege. We'll get back to that in a minute.
He's getting back into
Malatesta
it,
then
though.
lists other objections, such as some positions in society are just too important to leave to the free will of individuals. If it isn't the government, who would distribute food, provide healthcare and education? Who would organize large-scale projects such as bridges, scientific research, etc.? Who would have the power to prevent and punish crime? What about people who don't care about solidarity, who wouldn't want to work, who would spread diseases by not taking care of themselves, or people that would use violence for their own pleasure? Who would stop them if not the government? Taking down the government would mean the destruction of social organization, everyone for oneself, the domination of one over the other, in one word, chaos. Malatesta will answer all these questions and concerns in the following chapters. First, he answers to the authoritarian socialists by saying that even if you abolish private property and change the social conditions of society, the government wouldn't change its nature. It would still seek to dominate. Malatesta talks about it in terms of organ and function. An organ has a function. A heart pumps blood. Now, if you take away the function of an organ, it will either die or find a way to reestablish that function. Now, let's apply this to a social organ, an army. Its function is to fight. If the army has no reason to fight, if there are no threats, the army would either have to create a fight or disintegrate. The police force, if there are no crimes, would either have to create crime or disappear. Finally, a government and its function, defending privileges, would either have to create privileges or collapse in the absence of privileges to defend. And we could argue that in a classless society, a government couldn't defend the interests of one particular class unless the government itself was a class. The group of people, the one that governs, is in charge of the collective power. It has immense power, and because of that, we have to recognize that they form a privileged class. They have power and privileges, and everything would lead us to
This
believe
part's
that they would
important.
protect that power and these privileges. If someone or a group of people contests that power or a decision the government made, they would have to be dealt with. And then the old story of the privileged class, which arises through the complicity of the government, starts all over again, and in this instance, if it did not seize the land, would certainly capture key posts, specially created, and would oppress and exploit no less than the capitalist class. And thus the government would be passed to and fro in the same hands, and democracy, which is the alleged government of all, would end up, as usual, in an oligarchy, which is the government of a few, the government of a class. And what an all-powerful, oppressive, all-absorbing oligarchy must be one which has, at its service, that is, at its disposal, all social wealth, all public services, from food to the manufacture of matches, from the universities to the music halls. Keep in mind, Malatesta wrote this in 1891, decades before the 1917 Russian Revolution. Next chapter, we'll ask ourselves, what if a government wasn't a class? And we'll see if that would justify the existence of a government in a socialist society. We'll also answer the very interesting question asked earlier, who would have the power
music
to
swells
prevent
again,
and
it's
punish
like-
crime? Let's assume that last chapter we were wrong about the government being a dominant class. For a moment, let's agree with those who Kropotkin called the utopians of authority, or people that believe that authority won't be used to oppress others. Even then, more questions arise. What purpose would this government serve that communities couldn't? How would a government strengthen solidarity? Malatesta goes back to the
That's
image
Hunky
of
Bear,
the
I'm
bound
sorry.
man from chapter 1. We are used to living under a government which takes over all that energy, intelligence, and will which it can direct for its own ends, and it hinders, paralyzes, and suppresses those who do not serve its purpose or are hostile. And we think that everything that is done in society is carried out thanks to the government, and that without the government, there would no longer be any energy, intelligence, or goodwill left in society. It's as if we believe that without a master, we can't feed ourselves because the masters monopolize private property. We also believe that without a government, we can't organize because the government monopolizes the instruments of solidarity. The landowner doesn't create food out of nothing. We can produce food without him. The government doesn't organize out of nothing. We can organize ourselves without it. In other words, the government uses the moral and material forces already present in society. It doesn't create them. It can't create forces out of nothing. All it can do is use the force in society that already exists. This can throw us into a discussion on what makes societies progress, individual initiative or social action. Does it come from individuals or the collectivity, or we could say the government? Malatesta says that the question is a bit misguiding. It is in the organism of every individual that all thoughts and human actions inevitably have their origin, and from being individual they become collective thoughts and acts when they are and become accepted by many individuals. Social action, therefore, is neither the negation nor the complement of individual initiative, but is the resultant of initiatives, thoughts, and actions of all individuals who make up society. So, with or without a government, social progress comes from individuals. There is no need for a government to initiate that progress. Furthermore, the government could actually be slowing that progress down. And if instead, as do the authoritarians, one means government action when one talks of social action, then this is still the resultant of individual forces, but only of those individuals who form the government or who by reason of their position can influence the policy of the government. Under a government, a society will only progress from the forces of a small amount of individuals, the governors, which is extremely far from a society progressing from the forces of all individuals. So hopefully now you understand that when anarchists speak of liberty, they don't mean becoming more independent from society or freeing themselves from social constraints, but rather it is a question of preventing some individuals from oppressing others, of giving all individuals the same rights and the same means of action, and of replacing the initiative of the few, which inevitably results in the oppression of everybody else. It is, after all, a question of destroying once and for all the domination and exploitation of man by man, so that everyone can have a stake in the common well, and individual forces, instead of being destroyed or fighting among themselves or being cut off from each other, will find the possibility of complete fulfillment and come together for the greater benefit of everybody. So if we go back to the utopians of authority, even if the government wasn't a privileged class, it would still reduce the potential of the productive, organizing, and protective forces of society because they only take into account the forces coming from the governors. If non-governmental forces of society demand a change, then the government will oppose it until the demand is thoroughly fought for. Malatesta quotes French historian Jean de Sismondi on
This is
that
what I
thought.
was talking about earlier.
The state is always a conservative power which legalizes, regularizes, and organizes the victories of progress, but never introduces them. These victories are always started down below. They are born in the heart of society, from individual thought, which is then spread far and wide, becomes opinion, the majority, but in making its way, it must always meet with and combat in the powers that be, tradition, habit, privilege, and error. We have seen this from women's suffrage to the civil rights movement and queer rights. This is not only applicable for the defense of minority rights. The fight for cannabis legalization in Canada, for example, started down below, with governments slowing that progress down. But one government did finally concede and legalized, regularized, and organized the victories of that progress. Now, some may think that it's because of the government that such progress was made, but we could also argue that it's actually in spite of the government. Alright, so governments are bad, but how would society work without a government? Look around you. Most of our social activities don't come from the government. Work, barter, study, travel, and morality in general. When the government does intervene, it usually adds unnecessary steps which renders the social activity more difficult. On a large scale, governmentless cooperation also happens with large associations spreading across countries, such as capitalist corporations or other associations which, inspired by a love of one's fellow beings, or by a passion for science, or more simply by the desire to enjoy oneself and to be applauded, are more representative of the groupings as they will be in a society in which, having abolished private property and the internecine struggle between men, everybody will find his interest in that of everybody else, and his greatest satisfaction in doing good and in pleasing others. Malatesta argues that all aspects of society could be organized that way if it wasn't for the obstacles imposed by governments, the dissensions created by private property, and the discouragement felt by most people as a result of the seizure of wealth by a few. In other words, in a society that promotes competition and discourages this kind of association, it won't happen. As we have said earlier, the government doesn't create out of nothing. If the government didn't take care of the postal service, for example, people would organize and do it. The government adds nothing. And the more the need is universal and urgent, the more volunteers will there be to carry it out. If the people had the power to deal with the problems of production and food supplies, oh, have no fear that they might just die.
Because we are in a more progressive form of capitalism, having this sort of process is a lot different. Just so you know. Quinn says, by the way, I was looking in a secondhand bookstore. I found it 1867 edition of Das Kapital by Karl Marx. Yes, but 200 euros was a bit much. Still thinking about it. Do you have any friends that may be able to like split it with you? That's what I would do. I'd be like, hey, I'll take out a loan. Oh, that'd be so sick. But that's kind of, I mean, Das Kapital has like some references to what we're talking about here. It's a good read too. Or audiobook if you're like me and too dyslexic to read a lot. If it's still there next month, maybe. Yeah, no pressure, no pressure. Maybe they'll be able to put it on hold, or you can hide it. Sometimes I hide things at stores and stuff. You already read it, but that's a first edition. I know. It'd be so funny to keep it and like try to sell it. It'd be so kind of like against like what he says about capitalism. Just like bringing more value to goods than necessary. But it'd be really cool. I think it's kind of funny. But you should do it. If you can. Otherwise, don't do it. Don't feel any pressure. Don't get something that you shouldn't get, you know?
We're waiting for a government to make the necessary laws to deal with the problem. People don't need a government to work, cooperate, and eat.
15 or so
won't let
minutes
themselves
left.
starve. Not only that, but they will carry out these jobs more productively. If we do things now which only interest a few, we will do them that much better and more intensively when they will be of interest
You know more
to
about
everybody.
some of that stuff than I do.
Add to that the fact that the workplace would be democratic and people would work to strengthen their community, not out of fear starvation. Remember, if people work and allow themselves to be exploited, it's to feed themselves. Anarchist associations still organize and have administrators, but Malatesta formulates a clear distinction between governors and administrators. While a governor is privileged and can make his or her ideas prevail, administrators are workers just like any other and can't impose their ideas like governors can. But let's get to one of my personal favorite parts of this book, the answer to the following question. Without a government, how could a society defend itself without a police force or a justice system? Many suppose that if there were no carabiners, policemen, or judges, everyone would be free to kill, to ravish, to harm others as the mood took one, and that anarchists, in the name of their principles, would wish to see that strange liberty respected which violates and destroys the freedom and life of others. Of course, this is absurd. We believe that in a society with no private property, where the needs of everyone would be taken care of, when competition is traded for cooperation, the reasons which make people act immorally, often stemming from poverty, would disappear.
Hard times are never forever.
There would therefore be a lot less violence in an anarchist society because we'd be eliminating the roots of evil. But supposing that as a result of the kind of education received from present society, or for physical misfortune, or for any other reason, someone were to want to do harm to us and to others,
It will be
one
better.
can be sure that we would exert ourselves to prevent
You
him from
got
so doing
this.
with all the means at our disposal. Of course, because we know that man is the consequence of his own organism as well as of the cosmic and social environment in which he lives, because we do not confuse the inviolable right of defense with the claimed ridiculous right to punish, and since with the delinquent, that is, with he who commits antisocial acts, we would not, to be sure, see the rebel slave as happens with judges today, but the sick brother needing treatment, so would we not introduce hatred in the repression, and would make every effort not to go beyond the needs of defense, and would not think of avenging
I want to
ourselves,
give you
but
a
of
hug.
seeking to cure, redeem the unhappy person with
I
all the
hope this
means
helps
that
though.
science offered
Maybe
us.
it stresses you out more. I don't
This
know.
quote is pretty self-explanatory. Anarchist societies will defend themselves against antisocial acts, but they would see antisocial acts like we would today see an illness. If your conditions, mental or social, pushed you to believe that crime
Chaotic.
was what you should do, then something is wrong and we should try to fix what's wrong, not punish. Crime is not the problem, but the symptom of a problem.
Yes.
Anyhow, Malatesta also argues that unwritten laws such as customs not being regulated by the government are better followed because they're socially enforced by the community. Because they don't rely on an external force, the government, to apply these rules, the community does it itself and it's super effective. Malatesta gives an example of desert caravans in Africa where water is so precious it can't be wasted. Wasting water isn't illegal, but people understand the custom and know that it's regulated by their close ones. The social consequences of wasting water are, again, very effective. Malatesta continues. Is it perhaps because of the gendarmes that more people are not killed? In most of the villages in Italy, the gendarmes are only seen from time to time. Millions of people cross the mountains and pass through the countryside far from the protecting eye of authority, such that one could strike them down without the slightest risk of punishment, yet they are no less safe than those who live in the most protected areas. And statistics show that the number of crimes is hardly affected by repressive measures, whereas it changes dramatically with changes in economic conditions and in the attitudes of public opinion. So the government and its police force claim to be protecting the individual's security, but at the same time protects private property. Yet private property concentrates wealth in the hands of a few, creating economic conditions which stimulate crime, risking the security of individuals. It's almost as if cops and the government try to fight crime while protecting a system which encourages crime. So yeah, the government doesn't really help when it comes to preventing crimes. Its justice system is, in its essence, unfair as it privileges a small part of the population. Anatole France, a French poet, wrote this simple yet very telling line. The law in its majestic equality forbids the rich as well as the poor to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal bread.
There's a lot of chapters to this book, y'all.
After reading the previous 6 chapters, you might be saying, anarchism does sound pretty cool, but I don't want to blindly jump into it. Give me the details of how an anarchist society would function.
I think this part's pretty debatable though. Like, I think an anarchist society would still have to have structure, a little bit like how I've explained a lot in the past, but I'm not a traditional like anarchist, which is why I don't use the label, and that's why I kind of use the terminology of like democratic socialist and stuff like that, because you can't necessarily have full anarchism. It just doesn't necessarily work with the scale that we have in society as of now. Would we ever be able to get there? Probably. If you get to a point where people are not able to work, like if technology progresses to the point where people aren't necessarily needed for manufacturing or for like making goods, or there's less jobs than there are people, the government will have to transition into this form of like being, or there will have to be some type of like mass casualty event that makes it so that society can continue to function as normal. But then we get into like what is it, like 1984 or whatever that book is. More of that vibe. Chaotic says, as a determinist myself, I see crime as an illness that needs to be isolated and cured if possible. So I love this quote. Hell yeah. Most people don't want to commit crime. Like when I was super poor and I was living in my van, sometimes I had to steal food from like Walmart and stuff in order to make ends meet. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but it was something that I fucking had to do, you know? And there's not really a lot of other options for most people. So like when you get to a point where you're just like, oh damn, I have to go against like what I want to do because if I don't, I'm going to starve, or if I don't, I'm not going to have the resources I need to keep going, then you're just like, what the fuck? It really radicalizes you. Quinn says anti-stalking definition, learning a person's routine in order to avoid them. I do that a lot, Quinn, just so you know. Low-key, kind of like my vibes, honestly. Me at like all of my exes. And my family. Not anymore though. Kind of a vibe though. Slay.
Malatesta makes a list of many questions that anarchists might face. What methods will be used to teach children? How will production be organized? Will there still be large cities, or will the population be evenly distributed over the whole surface of the earth? And supposing all the inhabitants of Siberia should want to spend the winter in Nice, and if everyone wanted to eat partridge and drink wine from the Chianti district, and who will do a miner's job or be a seaman, and who will empty the privies, and will sick people be treated at home or in hospital? And who will establish the railway timetable?
Anti-stalking is
And
still
what will
stalking
be done
though.
if an engine driver has a stomach ache while the train is moving? Malatesta does recognize that most of these questions are extremely important, but it would be absurd to expect definitive answers from an anarchist. If you do, then you have failed to understand what anarchism is about. We are no more prophets than anyone else, says Malatesta. It would be weird for us to prescribe particular ways of functioning for tomorrow's societies, since by doing that, we'd pretty much become a government ourselves. What we think works now could work better in a different way tomorrow. We don't know how people will perform without domination and without poverty, without the struggle amongst one another. It's hard to predict how much will develop economically and scientifically once all the resources we create will be invested to benefit everybody. Maybe we could put a lot of resources into automation to free people from work, or maybe that won't be possible. We'll see the problems that face us as a community and solve them as a community. What is important is that a society should be brought into being in which the exploitation and domination of man by man is not possible, in which everybody has free access to the means of life, of development, and of work, and that all can participate as they wish and know how in the organization of social life. In such a society, obviously, all will be done to best satisfy the needs of everybody within the framework of existing knowledge and conditions, and all will change for the better with the growth of knowledge and the means. So anarchism isn't an end goal. We don't believe that once anarchy is completed, everything will be fixed and everything will be fine. We will still face problems. Anarchism isn't an end goal, it's a method. There are two popular non-anarchist methods: authoritarianism and liberalism. Authoritarianism believes that a minority can make decisions for the majority, which inevitably leads to oppression as seen earlier. Liberalism, not in the American progressive sense, but in the promotion of liberties, defense of property, reduction of government, etc., is the ideology the Western world subscribes to right now. Liberalism, of course, does not defend liberty for all, but only for the powerful, as they have the liberty to exploit the powerless, which leads, again, to authority. This does not lead to harmony, but to more tensions within society, as it promotes the each for him or herself principle, competition. So what is the anarchist method? The victory of the principle of solidarity through the abolition of property. This means that everybody will be needed to communally decide how to organize, and that's what anarchy points you towards. Not to a solution, but a way for you to find a solution. Don't rely on authority and don't rely on me or any other anarchists to tell you how to build a better society. Rely on yourself. Through trial and error.
This is something that's really important. So throughout this entire video, I've been saying over and over and over again, and this is for the people who have just joined. Also, sorry, Siri's using the cat stretcher. But you cannot have a revolution without having some form of anarchist movement. It inherently goes hand in hand. But what happens after is who is going to take advantage of the power vacuum that's left behind? So the question is, how do you have a movement without leaving a power vacuum? That is what has caused all of the problems in modern day society with everything. Because one could say that you always have to have a power vacuum, but that's not necessarily true. It isn't true. It's just when you have very quick upheaval, or if you try to dismantle everything immediately, that's what leaves a power vacuum. It doesn't have to be that way.
Through the counseling of academics and by considering the needs and wishes of everybody, you can find a solution along with your community to the questions you're asking. Anarchism empowers you. If you remember at the beginning of this chapter, the first question asked to anarchists was, what methods will be used to teach children? Here's Malatesta's answer. We don't know. So what will happen? Parents, pedagogues, and all who are concerned with the future of the young generation will come together, will discuss, will agree or divide according to the views they hold, and will put into practice the methods which they think are the best. And with practice, that method which in fact is the best will in the end be adopted. Now apply this to all the questions asked at the beginning of the episode. This is the answer. Anarchy, in common with socialism, has as its basis, its point of departure, its essential environment, equality of conditions. Its beacon is solidarity, and freedom is its method. It is not perfection. It is not the absolute ideal which, like the horizon, recedes as fast as we approach it. But it is the way open to all progress and all improvements for the benefit of everybody. For the next chapter, we'll be talking about chapter 8 and 9 as they strongly complement each other. We'll look over one last argument against anarchism, see what we've learned, and talk a bit about revolution.
He's a bitch. I hate him. No, I'm kidding.
So far, we established that anarchy is the best method to achieving the greatest good for humankind, since it abolishes classes economically and politically, and therefore abolishes competition between individuals. We also established that applying this method is possible. Malatesta brings up what is, to me, one of the best arguments against anarchism. This argument acknowledges the fact that anarchism is probably the best method to achieving a thriving society, but it also says that it would be very hard, if not impossible, to make humans work together if they were brought up in a competitive environment. Bear with me for this long quote, but I really think it's important. We find ourselves in a world which has always been divided into oppressors and oppressed, and if the former are full of the spirit of domination and have all the vices of tyrants, the latter are broken by servility and have the even worse vices that result from slavery. The feeling of solidarity is far from being dominant in contemporary society. It is competition which presses on everybody, workers and masters alike, and makes every man into an enemy in the eyes of his neighbor. How will these men, brought up in a society based on class and individual conflict, ever be able to change themselves suddenly and become capable of living in a society in which everyone will do as he wishes and must do, and without outside coercion and through the force of his own will, seek the welfare of others? With what single-mindedness, with what common sense would you entrust the fate of the revolution and of mankind to an ignorant mob, weakened by poverty, brainwashed by the priest, in which today will be blindly bloodthirsty, while tomorrow it will allow itself to be clumsily deceived by a rogue, or bow its head servilely under the heel of the first military dictator who dares to make himself master? So here, the argument recognizes the fact that an educated community brought up in cooperation wouldn't need a government, but it says that humans
We have
lacking
the
education and brought up in a world based on
I have another
competition,
video we could
both
watch.
side effects of capitalism, won't be able to adapt themselves to a completely different worldview. How could someone who grew up in a capitalist society, who got the minimum education required to work, and who sees their neighbor as someone they compete with, be fit to live in an anarchist society? Someone who advocates for the destruction of hierarchies might favor a democratic government which would gradually educate people to become independent and cooperative. Once that happens, then the government could disappear. This is an idea Marxists called the withering away of the state. It is the belief that once there is no more competition, the interference of the state power in social relations becomes superfluous in one sphere after another and then ceases of itself. The government of persons is replaced by the administration of things and the direction of the processes of production. The state is not abolished, it withers away. But anarchists believe that the state can't wither away. Being a concentration of power, it will always seek to preserve itself, to defend its existence, to protect its privileges. On top of that, as stated earlier, the government doesn't add anything to the current forces of society. Everything that happens in the world is done by people. If you want to educate people, teach them how to cooperate, and show that cooperation is in their interest, you can do it without a government. The current forces of society, without being monopolized by the government, can organize an anarchist revolution because the government doesn't add anything to these forces. There are no reasons to lead a revolution through a government. Without a government, people will still influence each other. We don't need to force people to cooperate. We'll cooperate out of necessity. Abolishing the government won't mean that we'll stop talking to each other and that we'll stop working together. We are mutually dependent. We will organize when the government is abolished, no matter how corrupted by capitalism we are, because the abolition of this mutual influence would be death. And when we vindicate the freedom of the masses, we are by no means suggesting the abolition of any of the natural influences that individuals or groups of individuals exert on them. What we want is the abolition of influences which are artificial, privileged, legal, official. In Chapter 9, Malatesta gives examples as to how, after a revolution, people would still organize without a government. If people want to teach and spread knowledge, they'll become teachers. A government could not just create such people magically out of nowhere. The government would just force these teachers to do what they love in a strictly regulated method, a method that most likely will reinforce the power of the ones imposing it. A revolution wouldn't destroy the forces that already exist, but let them free. Free to develop in the direction they want, free from domination. This would unlock an unknown potential that will most likely be very beneficial to society. And this is the only way that masses can raise themselves, for it is only through freedom that one educates oneself to be free, just as it is only by working that one can learn to work. This is very similar to what Immanuel Kant once wrote. Freedom is the precondition for acquiring the maturity for freedom, not a gift to be granted when such maturity has been achieved. A revolutionary government doesn't only have the high risk of becoming as oppressive as the capitalists they're overthrowing, but it's also a terrible way for people to learn how to govern themselves. Actually governing yourself is the best way to learn how to do it. If you let someone else govern for you, you forget how to govern. On top of that comes the classic question of how do we decide what shape the revolutionary government would take? Well, it would definitely not be a dictatorship of either an individual, a group, or a party, because again, who would decide who this group should be? One can only impose him or herself as the ruler, and that is obviously unacceptable. But what if we elect the people that govern us? Let's imagine that they are, unlike the dictatorship, incorruptible. Well, first, Malatesta raises concern for minorities which very likely wouldn't have a voice. He also brings up the interesting point that some of the minorities that might not be listened to are also the most active, intelligent, and radical parts of society. But aside from that, if we decide that we need a government because the people aren't...
I have to pause real quick, because a good example of that would be like immigrants who are working on farms, working on like in factories and that sort of thing. I'm not going to say like pause super long, but it's important to understand that like this is something that we're already living in right now, where people are just being completely overlooked, no one's paying attention to them, blah, 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 blah. We try to shine a light on it, but there's only so much attention that you can have on a certain thing. Like, you can't have your eyes everywhere all the time.
Ready to govern themselves, then how can we say that these people are smart enough to decide who can govern? So again, no, a government is not desirable, nor is it necessary. To solve the problems plaguing society, there's only one solution: revolution. We need to identify the roots of these problems: private property, the people who own social wealth, and the government who protects them. Appropriate the social wealth and its sources and make it available to the community for the community, therefore guaranteeing that the basic needs of all can be satisfied. Trade competition for cooperation, thereby eliminating any.
I feel like that's good. The music is just going to get really loud and annoying again, so I'm pausing it. Okay, that was a really good video. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to, pin it again just for a couple of minutes. But I think it's really important to understand that we can live in a society where we do have these big changes, where we do have more equality in this fashion, where we do have, life in a more organized and happy way. But the reason why we don't have it is because people keep thinking that you need to have some radical uprising in order to achieve it, and that's why it always falls. Remember earlier I was talking about there being like a power vacuum and how that's problematic and how that destroys everything? You don't want to do that. You have to do things slowly. So you know how we've slowly gotten very conservative in American society? One could argue that it's always been that way, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is we've had a regression into more of a Christian, nationalistic perspective for the past, over 100 years ago. It's been over 100 years. Even way back when, before Prohibition in 1917, it's been a monumental thing. So if you want things to change, you have to play the long game. And that's what's going on, right now in our current politics, but in the other way. So if you want there to be more of a anarchist style of society, you have to go the other way. We've had lots of progressive things happen. We've had lots of movements or whatever that have gained momentum and speed. But the reason why it doesn't last is because people want that change immediately. You're not able to sit it out and wait and try to build things. People get tired, they get bored, and it's hard to stay motivated. So without adequate community engagement efforts, where you have smaller groups that are existing outside of the larger movement, with politicians and stuff, you won't be able to see that. So chaotic. When you're saying, I wonder if we will ever live to see a communist or anarchist society, we have seen it, but it's only always been temporarily. And that's for so many reasons. Primarily because, one, the largest societies that we have, or largest governing societies we have not allowed for those societies to flourish. So we've seen some movements in Mexico, but America kind of destroyed a lot of those movements that existed. We've seen movements in Africa and America, as well as other Western nations stifle that out. You've seen that before with Korea, where North Korea tried to become more of granted it was very dictatorship, but the initial movement was very communist leaning. But what causes people to go more to a dictatorship is when they get a ton of upheaval from surrounding nations. They don't know what to do, so they're just hey, this person seems like a good leader. Or you have someone who takes advantage of the power vacuum that's created with the instability in their governance that is caused by foreign powers. It's hard to talk when I have gum in my mouth. But yeah, we've had things exist, but it has only been temporary. Even with the Soviet Union, the USSR, it initially started very left-leaning and with a lot of left-leaning movements. You could say the same thing about what happened in Italy before Lenin gained a ton of power. My biggest criticism with anarchism and communism is that it's not able to be maintained because it's too fast. It is too fast. Every single form of government that's been able to be long-standing has been something that the majority of the public has been able to keep showing up for over and over and over again, to the point where they have different people come in and replace the people who get burnt out when things get tiring. And that's just like how it goes. Like you have, like the torch gets passed back and forth between these main leaders. So like America is a good example, but other countries are too. Like every single country that has a revolution, the revolution usually starts with like, people don't necessarily have like a fascist revolution. They have a left-leaning revolution because people want there to be more power for the people as a whole. But it gets easily taken advantage of because that's not how the revolution should actually be enforced. It's not how it should actually go. It legitimately fucks everything up if you try to do it that way. And that's why it hasn't been long-standing. Especially in America. We've had so many left-leaning movements that like have gained popularity, then dwindled and diminished, gained popularity, then gone again. And I honestly would have to say that like we're seeing another resurgence in left-leaning politics and ideologies, but I'm very doubtful that it will be able to stay long-term unless we can keep a hold on local spaces. So think like, I think Philadelphia has like primarily like democratic socialist people in their governance. Same with New York, you're getting more leaning towards that direction. People as a whole are starting to go more left leaning, and that's going to hold more of a long-term change. So like leftists or people who are left leaning cannot get discouraged by the fact that things are going so conservative right now. Like just because things like up in the federal governance is getting more and more conservative doesn't mean that that's the direction that we're actually going into. It doesn't mean that whatsoever. It just means that like, how do I say this? It means that we need to hold our ground and build up that momentum so we can get there again. Because that's how they became popular. Like, so long. Decades of that. Chaotic says, Josie, I gotta go sleep now. Gotta wake up early tomorrow. My tablet is already too hot. Oh, it's okay. So it's better for me to leave. Thanks for the small chat and sorry for not being able to stay longer. No, you're good. I'm gonna have to go too. I have to make food. To make dinner. Have a good rest of the stream. You're good. Have fun, Chaotic. I'll see you later. And we'll talk more about the history and stuff like that on Thursday, because that's like a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I don't know. I think it doesn't have to be what people want it to be. It can be a lot better than that. And it just takes a lot of time to get there. That's just how life is. I hope you guys kind of liked today. I know it was really weird, and I know more people are probably gonna like watch the VOD than actually like interact with the stream, because that's usually how it goes when I talk about like political stuff. Oh, like this. But this is a topic that I've been very passionate about. I think it'll be interesting to see where we go in society, and if we can have a slow and steady movement towards people like there being more equality and stuff. Because right now, it's pretty bad. Not even pretty bad. It kind of sucks. It really sucks being involved in like politics. But you know, the education process is really important, and it takes like a lot of community work, lots of community engagement, and lots of trying. Tons of fucking trying. Like you can't just like sit there and be like, oh, blah 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 blah. Wonder what's gonna happen, blah 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 blah. You have to like actually put in the work. Take a break, allow other people to take your place for a little bit, and then come back and continue. It's never going to be something that will last forever, but it's not something that's meant to last forever. I don't know. I still have a lot of opinions about it being like a long-standing thing. IMO, I don't think that it could be a long-standing thing, but I don't know. What do I know? What would I know about this? I'm kidding. This is just, I don't know. I've thought about this for a really long time. Maybe one day we could have like a stream where, oh, I maybe like bring someone else on and have them like deconstruct, like try to poke holes into my perspectives. Because I feel like that's where I would have the best problem solving abilities. That's honestly kind of why I like streaming so much. Although not many people show up for my political talks, which is kind of annoying because I want someone to sit here and like poke holes into like my ideas and thought processes because that's how you actually come up with better solutions. So it can be annoying to just sit here and just be like, oh. Anyways, such as life. Life goes on, and I do have to make some food. So we're gonna continue this conversation on Thursday. I have a couple. Oh my goodness. I have a couple of videos queued up, which will be really fun, and I hope it goes well. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys have another wonderful day, and I guess I gotta go. George says, okay, my thoughts on them. I guess I'm going to get into this first before I go. My thoughts on the writings from the 1890s. If he lived today, he'd throw the book in the trash. Um, I disagree. I think I think, like, I respect where you're coming from, but I disagree. But why do you have the perspective you do? It's good. I like to hear your opinion. Do you think that there is no way to function without capitalism in that like how it is now? Like what processes do you think are like not valid? And while you do that, I'm gonna go get some more water, and then I'll be back. I'll let you type. Otherwise, I know I'm just gonna not shut the fuck up. And I've been thirsty. I ran out of my peach water. My water. I'm gonna have to. I think I might get some like flavored water. I'll be back. I'm getting Mia. Okay, I'm back. Oh, I thought you'd. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'll be patient. No rush. No rush. Just gonna. Oh, my hips popped. Oh my god, they're so sore today too. Ugh. My legs have been super tight. That's because like stretch. Even though I need to stretch, but I am hypermobile. So like, this is how I tore my pec, by the way. I did too much physical labor, and then I didn't stretch like ever. So now I'm stretching. I don't think he knew that the world would become. The world is totally different from what he wrote in his book. Population of 8 billion. I don't think that's what we today. Yeah. Lots of things would have to change in order for it to function. You're right. I think we would have to have like hmm. Like I said, I think it's a transitionary kind of process. I don't think that governance works as we have it today. Hmm. What would you propose? Do you like how things are right now? Ugh. My arms are so tired. Everything is tired. I think we should have a smaller government, which is what's going now. I feel like, hmm, what was described in the book was a smaller government, though. Because what we have right now is technically bigger government. Like, when you have the government, especially, like, trying to dictate, like, hey, this should be legal, this shouldn't be legal, that sort of thing. Like, Trump coming in and saying that LGBTQ people should not be included in certain things and that they shouldn't be recognized by the federal government is, I would say, big government moves. Like, I think that he's actually enacting more big government decisions than small government decisions. Because trying to like control what the people can and can't do, I would say is more big government than trying to like control what the government already has like power over. So like allocation of resources. I'd say it's more big government to dismantle like public funding for things too, like PBS, which will still function without people involved in paying for stuff. Yeah. Because what happens when you have like a dismantling of the government too, like getting rid of a lot of government initiative stuff, it's kind of the Black Panther problem that I was talking about before. Like, the Black Panthers were a big threat to the local governance because they were doing mutual aid programs that made the government look bad, like having school lunches and that sort of thing. So it's either like you have organizations take the place of the government and the government gets mad and tries to sabotage it, and then the government has to instate it because people don't want to go back to society without it, or the government like tries to play along as much as they can. Because the reason why those parties were so like controversial was because of the mutual aid involved. So if the government makes everything smaller, mutual aid's just going to get more popular again, and there's going to be more threats to the government. It's like they're begging for an upheaval, which in some aspects they kind of are. It's kind of like they're baiting for people to riot. Not really riot, but like protest and come against them. But one could argue that's for a lot of different reasons. I don't know. I'll give you a second though. I know I can talk a lot more than you can type. So I'll chill a minute. I have my doodles. Okay, I said my piece. We can cover more on Thursday. Okay, I'll let you, if you want to. I highly recommend you read the book too. Go eat. Yeah, I have to cook. But yeah, I'll go do that. But I highly recommend that you read the book if you want to. It's like not bad. I really enjoy it. I don't know, but I hope you have good a good night. I hope I have a good night too. I'm tired. Oh, did you like the set? It's not done yet. Oh. Do you think I should clean out the fish tank on stream, or if I should kind of like do it outside of stream? That's kind of the debate I've been having for myself. Yeah, you're getting there. Yay! Thank you. I'm excited. My mind's being really cute. I'm excited to have more of a permanent set. It's taking a while though because I have to like put more thoughts into it. Yay! Anyways, I gotta go. We're dying. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I think it will. I think it will. I have to. I'll go to the post office tomorrow. And I think it will probably be there tomorrow. Yeah. Good night. Tomorrow we're gonna have the Iranian food, which will be fun, or the Persian food, which I'm really excited for because I love. Nom 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 nom. It'll be good. Okay, but anyways, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And I will be seeing you guys tomorrow for the cooking stream. So sleep well, stay safe, stay alive, and